Welcome to another deep dive. This one comes from Tell Me More, and it's a story that'll make you, well, think twice about taking those everyday conveniences for granted.
It's a reminder that sometimes those big, scary events, they start with the smallest of things. Almost unnoticeable. We're going to dissect a classic case, really. It shows how a series of seemingly insignificant hiccups can lead to a full-blown crisis. In this case, a nuclear one.
We're talking 3 Mile Island.
You got it. The accident at 3 Mile Island. We're going to break down not just the technical failures, but the human decisions, or indecisions, I guess you could say. The things that turned a manageable situation into, well, a near catastrophe.
Paint the picture for us. March 28, 1979, just after 4 a.m., 3 Mile Island Unit 2 in Pennsylvania. What's the scene?
Everything seems normal, routine even, but deep inside the plant, a chain reaction is about to begin, and the trigger, a blocked filter.
A blocked filter. That sounds almost too simple.
It's deceptive, for sure. This seemingly minor issue caused the feed water pumps to trip offline. And those pumps are crucial. They transfer heat away from the reactor core. No pumps, no heat transfer. Things start heating up fast.
Okay, so the reactor's getting hotter, the pressure's rising. What happens next?
The system's designed to release excess pressure. It's got a valve for that, called a pilot-operated relief valve, or PORV for short. It does its job, the valve opens, but then it gets stuck, stays open.
So it's just venting coolant nonstop. Not good.
It's a major problem. Reactor coolant's escaping. But here's the real kicker. The operators. They don't know the valve is stuck. There is a design flaw, you see. The indicator that shows the valve's position, not actually connected to the valve itself. So the operator saw a reading that said closed, when in reality that valve was wide open.
They're operating blind, basically. No idea how bad things actually are.
A chilling thought, isn't it? That stuck open PORV led to what's called a LOCA, a loss of coolant accident. It's every nuclear engineer's nightmare.
The LOCA. I'm guessing this one wasn't exactly by the book, huh?
That's where it gets even more interesting, or unsettling maybe. See, the pressure readings in the reactor were dropping. That's expected in a LOCA. But at the same time, the water level in the pressurizer, that's a key component for managing pressure, that level was going up. The operators, they were trained for a typical LOCA. Pressure down, pressurizer level down, this conflicting data, it threw them completely off.
So they're dealing with something they never anticipated. What do they do?
Based on what they knew, their training, the information they had, they made a mistake, a critical one. They thought the reactor was being overfilled with water. So they did what seemed logical at the time. They shut down the emergency cooling system.
They turned it off.
Yeah.
But the reactor was losing coolant.
Exactly. It's a prime example of how even good intentions, when mixed with bad information and a lack of preparation, can lead to disaster.
Now the core is exposed. It's not getting cooled. Things are going from bad to worse. What happens next?
Well, no coolant means the reactor core starts overheating quickly. This intense heat sets off a chemical reaction between the steam and the zirconium cladding that's on those fuel rods.
A chemical reaction. Inside the reactor. What does that even mean?
This reaction, it produces zirconium dioxide and hydrogen gas. And hydrogen gas is highly flammable. It's like a ticking time bomb inside the reactor.
I have a feeling I know where this is going. But before we get there, I have to ask. We've talked about equipment failures. But how much of this disaster was actually human error?
It's a tough question for sure. The operators, they made mistakes, yeah. But they were working with incomplete information, confusing readings from the instruments, and their training. It didn't really cover this kind of situation. It shows just how important training and clear communication are in a high-pressure environment, like a nuclear power plant.
A perfect storm of bad circumstances.
Yeah.
One thing after another.
Precisely. And we're not out of the storm yet. We've got that hydrogen bubble growing, a control room that's, well, let's just say not calm, and a community outside that has no idea about the danger that's brewing just a few miles away. We left off with a reactor core teetering on meltdown, a hydrogen bubble growing by the minute, and a control room scrambling to understand what was happening.
Controlled chaos, you could say.
You got it. And now imagine you're just outside the plant. You're a resident of Middletown, Pennsylvania. Wednesday morning, having your coffee, no idea that just a few miles away, a nuclear reactor is on the verge of disaster.
It's hard to even imagine the fear, the uncertainty. When the news finally broke, what was it like?
It was a mess, frankly. Communication, I mean. You had the plant operators saying one thing, state officials another, the NRC. Well, they had their own version of events. It was all just adding to the confusion.
So no one knew what to believe.
Exactly. Picture this. You're told the situation's under control, Then a few hours later, you're hearing about radiation leaks, whispers of a possible meltdown. It breeds fear, distrust. And that lingered long after the immediate crisis was over.
A communication breakdown on top of everything else.
It was. And in the middle of all this, you had evacuations, voluntary they called them, pregnant women, young children within a 5-mile radius, they were told to leave. Later, they expanded that to 20 miles.
Voluntary. But I bet a lot of people decided to leave anyway.
You're right. Official statements said things were stabilizing, but over 140,000 people just packed up and left.
That says a lot about the fear, the uncertainty.
It does. 3 Mile Island, it tapped into this deep anxiety about nuclear power. Radiation, it's invisible, it's poorly understood, it's scary, and it exposed a real lack of trust in the people managing this powerful technology.
So eventually, they get the situation under control. What happens next? How do you even begin to deal with the aftermath of something like this?
Well, once the reactor was stabilized, the focus shifted. What went wrong? How do we make sure this never happens again? They formed a presidential commission, the Khomeini Commission, to investigate.
A presidential commission. That shows how seriously they were taking this.
The Khomeini Commission, their findings were damning. They criticized everyone, the plant operators, the utility company, which was MetEd, even the NRC. Failures at every level, they said, from the way the equipment was designed to how the operators were trained to the emergency plans and the communication protocols. It wasn't just one thing that went wrong. It was a system failure.
So it was like a perfect storm, all these failures, human and technological, coming together.
Exactly. And the Commission's report, it was a wake-up call for the entire nuclear industry. It forced them to face the need for stricter safety standards, better training for operators, a complete overhaul of how they communicated and responded to emergencies.
So 3 Mile Island, it forced the industry to change.
It did. You had stricter regulations, improved training programs, and a renewed focus on safety culture within the nuclear industry.
Those changes, they were necessary. But I imagine they came at a cost.
They did. These new safety standards, they made nuclear power more expensive to produce, made it less competitive compared to other sources of energy.
Yeah, and the cleanup. Dealing with a damaged nuclear reactor, the radioactive contamination, that couldn't have been easy.
It was massive, took over a decade, cost almost $1 billion. Workers had to remove tons of radioactive debris, decontaminate the whole facility, figure out what to do with all the contaminated water. Complex, dangerous operation. It really showed the challenges that come with this kind of technology.
$1 billion. That's a staggering amount. And that doesn't even factor in the long-term impact on people, on the environment.
You're right, and that's where the story takes another turn. Officially, the radiation releases were minimal, but some studies, they show increased cancer rates in the area around the plant.
So even decades later, we're still trying to understand the true impact.
It's complicated. Proving a direct link between the accident and specific health issues, that's really hard. But the possibility that people are still suffering because of that night in 1979, it hangs over the whole story.
This whole thing, it really highlights the power of nuclear technology.
Yeah.
And how badly things can go wrong.
It does. And while 3 Mile Island led to important changes in the nuclear industry, it also fueled the anti-nuclear movement. It made people question the safety, the viability of nuclear power as a whole, and those questions, they're still with us today.
We're back, and wow, this deep dive into 3 Mile Island has been, well, intense. We've seen how these mechanical failures, human errors, communication breakdowns all came together to create one of the most serious nuclear accidents in U.S. history.
It's a story that, yeah, it still has an impact today, both within the nuclear industry and in how the public views nuclear power in general.
Before we wrap up, I want to dig into that a bit more. How did 3 Mile Island shape the future of nuclear power? Did it permanently damage the public's trust?
It definitely cast a shadow, that's for sure. 3 Mile Island, it became a symbol of just how dangerous nuclear technology can be. It played right into those existing fears, anxieties about nuclear power.
Yeah, those images. The plant, shrouded in steam, the evacuations, it's hard to forget.
Those images, they stuck with people. And they gave a lot of weight to the anti-nuclear movement. That movement gained a lot of momentum after the accident.
So 3 Mile Island, did it essentially stop the growth of the nuclear industry?
It definitely had an effect, yeah. The construction of new nuclear plants in the U.S., it slowed down a lot after 3 Mile Island. Many projects were just canceled.
Was that all because of public pressure, fear, or were there other things going on?
Public perception played a part, for sure, but there was also the economics of it. The stricter safety rules that came after the accident, they made nuclear power more expensive to produce, so it was less competitive with other energy sources.
It seems like the accident forced everyone to rethink nuclear power. Was it safe? Was it worth the cost?
Exactly. And that's a debate that's still going on today. Nuclear power, is it a clean, efficient energy source? Or is it too risky? With all the waste disposal issues, there's no easy answer.
It's this question. Weighing the potential benefits against those very real risks. And 3 Mile Island is a constant reminder of what those risks are.
It is, but it's also important to remember the accident led to some real improvements in the industry. The lessons learned from 3 Mile Island, as hard as they were, they forced the industry to get better. They had to implement stricter safety procedures, improve how they trained operators, and come up with better emergency plans.
So it was a tragedy, but it also led to some positive changes.
In many ways, yes. It was devastating for those directly affected, no doubt, and it had a huge impact on the nuclear industry. But it also pushed them to be safer, more responsible.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away? What's the legacy of 3 Mile Island all these years later?
I think 3 Mile Island serves as a reminder that when we use powerful technologies, especially ones that could have catastrophic consequences, we have a huge responsibility to get it right, to be transparent, accountable, and always put safety first.
It also shows how important the human factor is. Even with the best technology, the best training, people can make mistakes.
Exactly. And those mistakes, combined with design flaws, communication breakdowns, they can have a ripple effect, long-lasting consequences.
3 Mile Island, it's a story about technology. It's a story about human fallibility. And it's a story about the choices we make and the impact those choices can have.
It's a story that, yeah, it makes us think, how do we use energy? How do we manage these powerful technologies? What's our relationship with the environment?
Well said. This deep dive into 3 Mile Island has been, well, a lot to process, but it's been important. And I think it's a call to action for all of us to stay informed, to ask questions, to demand the highest standards from those who manage these powerful forces. Thanks for joining us on this journey, this deep dive into the past, present, and future of nuclear power.